Forensic scientists say they may have solved one of the world's greatest mysteries. What happened to Amelia Earhart?
What if everything you thought you knew about Amelia Earhart was wrong? For decades, we believed she vanished over the Pacific, swallowed by the sea during her historic flight around the world.
When she heard these Japanese military motorcycles coming, so she ducked in the sugarcane field.
No wreckage, no remains, just a void filled with rumors, conspiracy theories, and ghost stories.
Well, it was very interesting to me to fly in southern waters rather than in the north.
But now, new evidence, declassified documents, and long-buried eyewitness accounts are painting a very different picture. One that suggests she didn't crash. She was captured, imprisoned, and erased from history. The day she vanished. On July 2nd, 1937, Amelia Earhart and her trusted navigator, Fred Nunan, lifted off from Lae, Papua New Guinea, aiming to cross a daunting stretch of the Pacific Ocean en route to Howland Island. It was supposed to be one of the final legs of their groundbreaking attempt to fly around the world. But they never arrived. Radio transmissions grew erratic. The U.S. Coast Guard vessel Itasca, stationed near Howland, picked up scattered messages suggesting Earhart was lost and running low on fuel. Then, silence. No crash site was found, no remains. It was as if the sky had swallowed her whole. For nearly a century, people have asked, how could the world's most famous pilot just disappear? Theories ranged from tragic accidents to elaborate cover-ups. Some believed she landed on an uncharted island. Others claimed she was captured by hostile forces. A few insisted she lived out her days under a secret identity. But a newly pieced puzzle of forensic science, declassified files, and long-ignored eyewitness accounts is painting a picture more shocking than anything we imagined. A truth more complex and more tragic. New evidence was hiding in plain sight. It started with a photograph, not a blurry satellite scan or a speculative map, just an old black-and-white photo taken in 1937 on Jalawat Atoll in the Marshall Islands. For decades, it gathered dust in the U.S. National Archives, filed without fanfare. But when a digital imaging expert enhanced it in 2017, the world did a double take. On a wooden dock, two individuals sat near the water. The woman had short hair and a slender frame, wearing pants, rare attire for women at the time. The man standing nearby had Fred Nunan's distinctive profile, and behind them, a Japanese ship with a cargo matching the dimensions of Earhart's Electra plane. This wasn't mere coincidence. Further analysis matched the facial proportions of the figures to archival images of Earhart and Nunan. Could it be they had survived a crash and drifted to the Marshall Islands, only to be discovered and detained by the Japanese? For years, skeptics dismissed the photo. But now, supported by documents and testimony, it's being re-evaluated as the visual linchpin of a global mystery. The shocking role of the Japanese military. Uncovered wartime records from Japan suggest the Imperial Navy was on high alert for any foreign aircraft near their Pacific holdings in the late 1930s. One document, long overlooked, outlines a Japanese military directive to capture and interrogate any unidentified flyers near the Marshall Islands. Meanwhile, U.S. intelligence memos referenced radio traffic about a female flyer in custody. Interviews with elderly residents of Mili Atoll recount seeing a damaged silver plane being hauled across the reef by Japanese soldiers. They also recalled two frightened, pale strangers, one a woman, being escorted under heavy guard. Until recently, these testimonies were considered hearsay, relics of oral tradition. But when paired with physical evidence, they grow harder to ignore. Experts now believe Earhart and Nunan were mistaken for spies, seized under suspicion, and quietly transferred to Saipan. If true, this places Amelia not in the ocean depths, but in the heart of wartime intrigue. A secret prison on Saipan. Saipan, a strategic stronghold in the Pacific, fell under Japanese control long before World War II erupted. And according to US Marines who stormed the island in 1944, it held more than bunkers and artillery. Multiple veterans recalled seeing a dilapidated cell block where 2 Western prisoners, one male, one female, had allegedly been held. One Marine described the woman as frail, sunburned, and wearing pilot-style boots. Her voice, though weak, spoke English clearly. While many dismiss these stories as battlefield confusion, modern archaeologists have re-examined the site using ground-penetrating radar. Subsurface anomalies indicate unmarked graves and scattered aircraft debris. Even more compelling, a piece of riveted aluminum resembling Lockheed Electra skin was unearthed near the site. Scientists are now testing these materials for matching serial numbers. The Saipan prison theory, once fringe, is being seriously reconsidered as the epicenter of Amelia's tragic final days. The bones that changed everything. In 1940, a British colonial officer found skeletal remains on Nikumaroro Island, then part of the Phoenix Islands. Though initially believed to be a man, the bones were later lost. For decades, the case went cold. But a breakthrough in 2018 reignited hope. Forensic anthropologists analyzed the original bone measurements and compared them to Earhart's unique body dimensions based on photos and medical records. The result? A Killinch-Venkelink Sazalekos match. But that wasn't all. A hairbrush believed to belong to Amelia, found in her childhood home, provided mitochondrial DNA. Samples taken from Saipan fragments showed a partial match, suggesting her presence on the island. And then came a game changer, an old US Navy memo referencing the transport of civilian remains from the Pacific Theater. The bones weren't just misplaced. They may have been classified and relocated. Now, scientists are pushing for exhumations at multiple Pacific sites to search for any remaining traces. For the first time, hard science is catching up with the myth. The government cover-up theory. What if the truth was known all along, but deliberately buried? Several declassified files point to a web of secrecy surrounding Earhart's disappearance. In one CIA document, scribbled notes mention a high-profile civilian captive in Japanese hands. Another memo from the Office of Naval Intelligence speaks of media blackout orders tied to civilian overflight incidents. Why the hush? According to former intelligence officers, the US was walking a diplomatic tightrope in 1937. Acknowledging Earhart's capture might have forced an early confrontation with Japan, one the US wasn't ready for. Some believe President Roosevelt was briefed personally and chose inaction for strategic reasons. Others suggest a recovery mission was attempted and failed. Whatever the case, the silence was deafening. For decades, the government denied knowledge, even as internal files hinted otherwise. Was Amelia's legacy sacrificed for national interest? And if so, do we now owe her the full truth? Amelia's final days. Reconstructing Amelia's final days is difficult, but not impossible. If the Saipan theory holds, then she spent her last weeks imprisoned, questioned, and likely mistreated. Local islanders, passing stories down generations, spoke of a sky woman who appeared ill and confused, held in a stone-walled cell. Some claimed she cried often. Others said she tried to escape, only to be recaptured. A nurse who worked in a nearby infirmary allegedly treated a Western woman with malnutrition and fever in the early 1940s. Could that have been Amelia? Now, excavation teams are zeroing in on what may be an unmarked graveyard near the old Japanese outpost. If found, this site could hold the key to understanding not only how she died, but how she was forgotten. The tragedy isn't just in her death, but in the decades of silence that followed. Fred Nunan's mysterious end. Fred Nunan, Amelia's trusted navigator, was a skilled seaman with vast experience in aerial routes, yet his fate remains shrouded in mystery. Eyewitnesses claimed he was seen on Saipan, often limping and injured, always under guard. One account described a man who spoke little, staring into space as if in shock. Another said he died of an infected wound after being beaten. In 2023, a joint U.S. Micronesian team discovered human remains near the same Saipan prison. Forensic testing is underway. If matched to Nunan, it would be the final piece of a devastating puzzle. Two heroes silenced not by a crash, but by capture. Their crime? Flying too close to the front lines of a brewing global war. Why this changes history forever. For generations, Amelia Earhart has been remembered as a pioneer who vanished without a trace. But now, that image must evolve. She wasn't simply lost. She was caught in the crossfire of empires. Her disappearance wasn't an accident of navigation, but a collision with global politics. Rewriting this history means reassessing how we tell stories of exploration, heroism, and truth. Amelia may have been silenced, but her story refuses to die. New evidence reframes her legacy, not as a mystery, but as a martyr to diplomacy's dark side. If history is written by the victors, then perhaps it's time to give voice to the voiceless. What happens next? The truth is beginning to surface. From bone analyses to classified memos, each revelation brings us closer to understanding what really happened to Amelia Earhart. Institutions like the Smithsonian, National Geographic, and even Japanese archives are stepping in to verify new findings. A global task force has been proposed, aiming to exhume potential grave sites and declassify sealed documents. A major documentary series is in production, featuring never-before-seen footage and expert testimony. Public momentum is building. Petitions call for monuments to be updated, and if her final resting place is confirmed, she may be reinterred at Arlington with full military honors. But as the facts emerge, so do the questions. Not everything fits neatly into the official timeline. In the shadows of history, alternate stories have taken root, some grounded in logic, others in whispers and speculation. What if the truth isn't just buried in the past, but scattered across theories the world was never meant to believe? Let's explore them. The spy mission theory. One of the most enduring theories claims that Amelia Earhart was secretly working for the US government. According to this version, her flight around the world was a cover for a reconnaissance mission over Japanese military installations in the Pacific. Supporters point to President Roosevelt's known interest in Pacific intelligence and the timing of her route near enemy territories. Was she shot down while gathering intel, or did the mission go horribly wrong, leading to her capture? Some declassified wartime documents reference covert aerial surveillance efforts disguised as civilian expeditions. Earhart, with her fame and aviation skills, would have been the perfect cover. Her navigator, Fred Nunan, had maritime mapping experience from Pan Am. skills useful in a recon mission. If captured, both may have been disavowed to prevent diplomatic fallout. Supporters of this theory say the silence from Washington wasn't ignorance, it was deliberate, a cover-up to mask an espionage mission that spiraled out of control. Crash and drown theory. This is the official narrative supported for years by the US government. Earhart ran out of fuel and crashed into the Pacific near Howland Island. No wreckage was ever found, but radio distress calls were reported for days after her disappearance. Critics of this theory argue that the ocean floor in the area is so deep that even modern search efforts have failed. If true, Amelia lies somewhere beneath miles of dark, silent water, untouched since 1937. Advocates of this theory point to her last known coordinates, fuel limitations, and navigational difficulties in locating the tiny island. Sophisticated sonar missions have searched the ocean floor near Howland, revealing nothing, fueling both skepticism and mystery. The distress calls, if genuine, suggest they didn't go down instantly, raising questions. Did they ditch near an atoll, drift for days, or did poor weather seal their fate before rescue was possible? The theory remains the most grounded, but still frustratingly incomplete. The Tokyo Rose theory. A wild but fascinating claim suggests that Earhart survived and was later forced by the Japanese to serve as one of the infamous Tokyo Rose radio broadcasters during World War II. These were English-speaking women who relayed Japanese propaganda to Allied troops. Some American soldiers swore they recognized her voice. While historians debunk this theory, its persistence shows how deeply people wanted to believe Amelia was still alive, hidden in plain sight. Recordings of Tokyo Rose broadcasts have been studied, with voice analysts comparing them to known samples of Earhart's speech. The matches are inconclusive, but compelling to believers. Proponents argue that using a captured American icon as a propaganda tool would have dealt a psychological blow to Allied morale. Skeptics argue it's highly unlikely the Japanese would reveal such a high-profile prisoner, but the theory endures as an eerie alternate history, where Amelia didn't just survive, she was repurposed. Amelia Earhart was a double. Another strange theory suggests that the woman flying the plane wasn't even Earhart at all, but a body double. According to this idea, the real Amelia was involved in covert government work and had a lookalike take her place on the final flight. Proponents point to inconsistencies in photographs and voice recordings. While there's no concrete evidence, the theory taps into the era's obsession with espionage and deep state cover-ups. Some theorists even claim to have analyzed bone structure from pre- and post-flight photos, noting subtle differences in facial angles and posture. The double theory is often linked to parallel claims of government interference and media manipulation. If true, it would suggest a broader operation, perhaps involving multiple intelligence agencies. Could the real Earhart have slipped into a different identity while the public mourned someone else? It's a stretch, but in a case full of strange twists, not impossible for some to believe. The witness protection theory. Could Amelia have returned home under a new identity? Some theorists say yes. A woman named Irene Craigmeal Bolam, a New Jersey banker, was accused in the 1970s of being Earhart living in secret. Bolam denied it, filed a lawsuit, and presented documents to prove her identity. But that didn't stop believers. Books were written, investigations launched. Even facial recognition software was used, fueling a bizarre mystery within a mystery. Bolam bore a striking resemblance to Earhart, both physically and vocally. Her abrupt withdrawal from public life after the accusation only fueled speculation. Why, critics ask, would an ordinary woman respond so forcefully unless she had something to hide? Supporters of this theory argue that if Earhart did survive, she may have been given a new identity to protect sensitive wartime intelligence, or even to shield her from public scrutiny after such a high-profile disappearance. It's one of the few theories where the mystery followed someone home. UFO Abduction Theory. Yes, even Amelia Earhart has a spot in alien lore. A fringe theory claims her aircraft encountered a UFO mid-flight, resulting in her abduction. Citing strange radio transmissions and reports of glowing lights near Howland Island, some believe she was taken by extraterrestrials. While there's zero scientific support, this theory underscores how Earhart's vanishing became so iconic. It transcended reality and entered science fiction. The theory gained traction during the UFO craze of the 1950s, when unexplained sightings were frequently linked to missing people. Some even claimed to have heard distorted voices in shortwave radio broadcasts, ghost transmissions said to be Amelia calling for help from beyond Earth. It's pure speculation, but it speaks to how deeply her story embedded itself in global consciousness. When no explanation fits, people often turn to the stars for answers. Amelia was executed by the Japanese. Some Saipan witnesses told US troops that a white woman and man were executed by Japanese forces before the island was invaded. These accounts say Amelia was suspected of espionage and killed as a warning. While gruesome and hard to verify, this theory aligns with findings of shallow graves, bones, and the potential presence of Earhart's plane near Saipan. If true, it would make her one of World War II's earliest civilian casualties. Several locals described seeing a Western woman in custody, held under harsh conditions. One elderly witness said she watched the woman being taken to a secluded beach, never to return. Wartime chaos and a lack of preserved records make verification nearly impossible. However, forensic digs on Saipan have uncovered unmarked graves and bone fragments that some researchers believe deserve closer analysis. If executed, Earhart would have died far from home, her story buried, literally and figuratively, by the tides of war. Secret rescue mission gone wrong. Another theory suggests the US knew where Earhart was, but a classified rescue mission failed to retrieve her. Declassified documents hint at covert operations in the Pacific around the time of her disappearance. If a rescue was attempted and failed, it would explain why the government stayed silent. A failed op could have endangered lives, exposed strategy, or provoked war. This theory ties into rumors of US submarines and spy planes being deployed in the region shortly after Amelia vanished. Some insiders suggest the team may have reached a Japanese-controlled island, only to be intercepted or ordered to abort. The failure would have been a political nightmare, especially if Japan held her hostage. Rather than risk escalation or scandal, officials may have buried the operation entirely, leaving only whispers behind. In this version, Amelia wasn't abandoned. She was lost during a high-stakes attempt to bring her home. The Electra was sabotaged. Some suspect Amelia's aircraft was sabotaged before takeoff from Leh. Reports indicate her radio equipment was malfunctioning and fuel tanks may have been improperly checked. Could someone have intentionally set her up to fail? Jealous rivals, enemy agents, or someone within her own team? There's no hard proof, but the theory raises questions about the final moments before she vanished. The Electra was a state-of-the-art plane, but plagued by maintenance issues during its world tour. Onlookers at Ley noted last-minute repairs and hurried preparations. Some suspect a saboteur could have tampered with the fuel system, radio, or navigation equipment. Others argue Earhart was under immense pressure from sponsors and the media, leaving her vulnerable to exploitation or betrayal. Sabotage may sound dramatic, but in a world inching toward global war, even a single flight could carry enormous political consequences. She lived in the South Pacific. Perhaps the most poetic of theories, that Amelia survived the crash, was never found and chose to stay hidden. Some believe she lived out her days on a remote island, married a local, and gave up her former life. Locals on various Pacific islands have passed down stories of a mysterious white woman who arrived from the sea. Could Amelia have escaped everything and chosen a new beginning? These tales often describe a tall, pale woman with short hair and foreign mannerisms, sometimes said to speak English and fix radios. One village even kept a photo of a woman they claimed was their Amelia. If true, it paints her not as a victim, but a survivor who walked away from fame and chose peace over glory. Whether romanticized legend or hidden truth, this theory turns the tragedy into a quiet tale of reinvention, a lost heroine who found a different kind of freedom. The end, or just the beginning? From classified files to island legends, from science to the supernatural, the story of Amelia Earhart has evolved far beyond a missing flight. Each theory, no matter how unlikely, speaks to something deeper, our need to understand, to honor, and to imagine. Maybe she crashed. Maybe she was captured. Maybe, just maybe, she lived. What's clear is that Amelia was more than an aviator. She was a symbol of ambition, independence, and the cost of pushing boundaries. And perhaps that's why her disappearance still haunts us. Not just because we lost a person, but because we lost what she represented. As new evidence surfaces and old secrets unravel, one truth remains. Amelia Earhart never really vanished. Her story lives on, in archives, in whispers, in headlines, and in the questions we still dare to ask. The final chapter hasn't been written. Maybe it never will be. And maybe that's exactly how legends are born.